So, Game of Thrones and Marxism, what would we say about that?
Okay, well, the main mode of production in Game of Thrones is feudalism.
Yes.
It's very much a kind of, what would you call it, an agrarian...
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Agricultural situation where people pay fealty to lords. You've got a feudalism, but it's kind of a feudalism that is in crisis. It's almost sort of in a state of breakdown, because you've got Tywin Lannister's gold has run out.
Yeah, and he's in debt as a result of
the
that.
Iron Bank. You've got wealthy merchants and slave traders who are sort of operating within a different economical framework that seems to be sort of gaining power as the show progresses. So it's interesting that you've got this kind of tension of modes of production that are
and it's kind of we're almost like shifting from one age of production to a different one, kind of as the narrative is developing, which is really interesting. I mean, this is kind of only, I guess, tangentially related to the topic, but one of the things that I've always found interesting about the whole World of Ice and Fire in terms of the kind of world building that George R.R. Martin has done as a part of it is the kind of amount of detail with which he even kind of includes economic questions as a part of how that particular universe is constructed. So I'm mainly, I guess, thinking about kind of not so much even the show, although it features in parts of it, or even the kind of books themselves, but some of the kind of supplementary material that Martin has written more recently. So I'm particularly thinking about, I read the Targaryen history book, quote unquote, called Blood and Fire quite recently, and one of the things that struck me whilst I was reading it is the fact of how many of the chapters just had these really quite long passages talking about the different kind of taxation laws that various Targaryen kings and their masters of coin were passing. And there's even a moment, I think, if my memory serves me correctly, where the people of King's Landing rise in revolt as a result of the kind of heavy-handed taxations that's been placed upon them by the Master of Coin, and during that rioting that takes place, they actually find and kill him. So there's a kind of a moment where we sort of have that, because economics is so firmly embedded into the world building, we actually kind of occasionally, not always, but sometimes we can kind of glimpse moments of what Marxist theory would talk about as class struggle taking place within the world. And I guess one of the ways in which it comes apparent in the show itself is through the kind of sparrows and the High Sparrow that end up placing themselves kind of in opposition to the rulers of King's Landing in the kind of some of the latter series. It doesn't end up well for them, but there are moments where when the High Sparrow is speaking to, I think, Cersei, for example, he talks very much in similar terms and almost in similar phrases as, let's say, the current leader of the Labour Party in the UK, which I think is quite interesting to think about there as well.
So things like about the many and not the few.
Many and not the few, and that kind of idea, and then, we are poor, but together we can kind of end an empire, and these kinds of phrases which sort of seem to be speaking towards some kind of a paused and stopped kind of proletarian revolution that was sort of bubbling away until the Sept of Baelor was blown up in one of the latter series.
I think it's key to remember that the High Sparrow in the show is a zealot. He's a fanatic.
Yeah.
He's a fanatic who has to be stopped by being blown up with wildfire. So, I think, there's something important about that, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's kind of, we could, again, as with the kind of some of the previous ones we've looked at, we've again kind of landed something where we've identified a particular pattern or a particular kind of motif that we could kind of analyze, critically interrogate, and theorize further. But it's sort of landed in another kind of complication. It's almost like there is, at times, quite difficult to kind of, the show seems to struggle, and I don't mean this as a kind of a criticism, but there's a kind of a struggle in the show for it to kind of firmly align itself with a particular kind of position in terms of the kind of politics that are being articulated. And I think the fact that as much as there might be a kind of proletarian revolution bubbling away with the sparrows, the fact that they are being presented as zealots seems to kind of also then suggest
a spectre of communism.
That's kind of a thing that they are almost, that narratively the show is uncomfortable about siding with fully, as much as there might be kind of indication towards, and that might say as much about our current political reality as it does about the political realities of Westeros, perhaps.
Well, we could say that it's part of the rich tapestry that George R. R. Martin creates, in that, like, he is quite good at creating a narrative that doesn't allow you to map black and white thinking on it. It doesn't allow you to come to an absolute position on anything. In a way that a lot of people, I think, have said is quite representative of real life. That it's not easy to map things neatly in that way.
So it's kind of dealing with the mess of them as
the
opposed
complexity
to,
of life.
Which I guess goes to, stands as a testament of the kind of the richness of the narrative, and why so many people across the world have been so captivated by it, perhaps.
Yeah.